Welcome into Trucker Talk Radio. You're on with J and J. I'm John. This is Justin. Today's guest has spent nearly 20 years in the transportation industry, leading teams at one of the country's largest carriers, and now driving operations and strategy at Sonar, the freight intelligence platform that tracks 125 billion in freight across 135 plus markets worldwide. Julie Vandekamp, Chief Marketing and Operations Officer at Sonar, has spent nearly 20 years in the industry. She's a graduate of the University of Wisconsin and holds an MBA from Emory University. And I have several friends that went to Emory University, and it's a fantastic school. Julie, welcome to Behind the Wheelhouse.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here today. Thanks for having me on.
So let's start from the beginning. Nearly 2 decades in transportation, someone with your talent. How do you get into trucking? Like, how did this all come to be?
Not by plan, I don't think. I don't know that any of us are ever like, oh, yeah, we chose to be in logistics and transportation.
I know I didn't.
No, me
People are
neither.
now as their supply
Right,
chain.
they are.
And especially since COVID, I think shining a light on the importance of it, people are choosing it more as a path. I grew up around trucking. My dad was an executive at trucking companies while I was growing up. So I guess it's sort of in my blood and you just get sucked in. You know, I went when I was a kid to take your daughter to work day and got to ride in a truck and go through a truck wash and do all of those things and thought it was like the coolest thing. Swore I would never get into this industry because I saw the stress of it. Interned in college at a trucking company doing ground up things. If you can, I'm really feeling old talking about my 20 years of experience and then what I'm about to say, but driver logs used to be on paper and they would send in paper trip packs every week. And I would
Right.
scan in scale tickets and fuel receipts and driver logs and make delivery appointments at Sam's Club and do all of those things in college. And I remember telling my dad, like, all right, I'm going to do this for this summer because it's a good job. And I know I need experience like working full time, but like,
hmm
I could never do this forever. I don't know how you guys do this. Like, it's so, it's hard. And then finished my degree, had a couple of options, and ended up getting a really great opportunity to go into pricing at US Xpress. And
hmm
so different than what I expected to be doing. I was an English major in college. And then here I come out of school doing math and working in spreadsheets all day. And I thought, I'll just do this for a year. It's like really good experience and pricing isn't really trucking and I can, apply it to anything else later and just kind of fell in love with it.
So explain pricing for those that might not know what you're talking about.
Sure. So when I first got into the industry out of school, our pricing department was responsible for processing and pricing all of the RFPs we would get from shippers. So a Walmart or a Procter and Gamble or smaller shippers send in what their lanes will look like for the year. And then we'd be responsible for saying, what available capacity we had, how many loads we could move per week or per year in each lane and at what price we'd be willing to do it for. So spent quite a while doing that, learning all of the different regions of the country, all of the different modes and intermodal and working with the railroads and working on pricing with them.
Yeah. So, and then that led to sales then, right?
Yes, I did a stint in our brokerage. So I spent 4 years in brokerage, still doing pricing and business development, and then came back to run that entire pricing department and then started a new department there where we merged our customer service teams from our asset-based group and our logistics group into a customer experience team. And then, yes, that led into sales as I had already been customer facing most of my career. So that was kind of a natural progression. And then ended my tenure there as president of Dedicated, which was a great opportunity for me because I hadn't had true driver responsibility prior to
Right.
that.
Yeah.
So got the opportunity to be responsible for about 3,000 drivers and trucks and go on site to a lot of our facilities and talk to those drivers and meet them and understand, how our processes affected them and what we could do to make things better and how we could approach safety in a different and better way than we had been prior to that. And it was great. I learned a lot over all of those years and then got the opportunity to come to Sonar and still be a part of this industry that I love, but really more from an industry level instead of a single organization level. And I still get to talk about rates and supply and demand and available capacity and how this industry affects our overall economy and kind of nerd out on all of that stuff and learn a lot of other things in the process. So.
Well, I want to ask you about Sonar. Of course, it's one of the biggest freight intelligent platforms in the industry. Can you explain? Because I know a lot of our listeners might not understand what that means, especially in the freight industry.
Yeah.
What you do, and what they try to fight and handle.
Yeah. So the short of it is we sell freight data, supply chain data. So if you think about Bloomberg and what like a Bloomberg terminal might look like for overall stocks and the overall economy, ours is very similar, except it focuses just on freight and the supply chain. So we have spot rate data and contract rate data, and we track tender rejections nationally and by market, and compare that to tender volumes to see where that is, if to see where that is going. And those rejections are usually a leading indicator of what's going to happen in the spot market. If you see rejections going up, very often spot rates are going to quickly follow and rise as well. So we have a UI platform that has really cool dashboards and adds a lot of market context so you can understand why those things are happening. Obviously, we offer our data via API and other services, but we also have some new things that we've done that are pretty cool. We do have an iOS app, great use case for drivers and smaller companies at $9.99 a month, where you can log in and get spot rates and also find blue markets. So markets where freight is available and rates are as ideal as they can be, right? So those are markets where there's both freight available and a decent rate. And then we do have some quick rates options where you can do a monthly subscription and just get access to rate intelligence, so you can see on a lane level what's happening with rates in the spot market, either via Chrome extension in your browser or through our UI. So that's sort of the large overview. Our main customers are shippers, carriers, 3PLs, and then financial institutions. We have a lot of data, an overwhelming amount of data. So we work really hard to try to make it as usable as possible.
How much of the industry right now is actually, changed in how decisions get made? I mean, I'm sure there are a ton of people that are listening that are just acting off gut instinct, or they're going off of like what I used to use, like with Truck Stop and that, just kind of like Rate Mate and stuff like that. How much of our intelligence has really grown? Like we have a lot more capabilities that we can get our hands on right now to make a much more informed decision than what we have been able to in years past.
So I think it has changed tremendously, and I think it's changing incredibly quickly right now. I actually gave a talk here in town to a large group of manufacturers early this week on AI and supply chain, which takes it like even further. But I think what we've gotten to is there is enough data to automate a lot of things and a lot of decisions, but ultimately there's no way to replace domain expertise, people who have been doing this and have those really great instincts and know how to problem solve and know how to handle exception management. I mean, that is where people will always be incredibly valuable, no matter how much data you have. But I do think with the amount of data available today and the tools that some of the more technologically savvy customers we work with can use to automate processes, or to even use AI agents trained on our data to help negotiate for them, so they can take those steps out of the process and really work on just exception management and relationship management. It's moving really quickly, and it's come a long way.
For mid-sized carriers and brokers trying to figure out exactly where to start with AI, not where the vendors necessarily say to start, what's your honest advice to them?
My honest advice is start small. A lot of people have concerns about data privacy and what they're going to put in. So you have to make sure that your company is comfortable with what you're doing, right? But you can start with it personally, or you can start by picking like something that you hate doing every day. And literally, it's as easy as opening up Claude and saying, I
Right.
have to generate this report every day.
Yep.
Can you automate it for me?
Let's touch on that for a minute because there's so many different AI avenues to pursue, right? Like you can go ChatGPT, you can go Grok, you can get, and I just found Claude. I've been using
Probably not a lot of Claude.
ChatGPT
I
and
like
Grok.
live
I
in,
just,
I use it personally. I use it professionally.
yeah, I
I,
can't
I like it more than
believe its capabilities outside of Justin's buddy chat because Justin, I
I
think
live on chat.
he
Yeah,
lives on chat,
I do.
but Claude opens up a whole new world and then even Gemini, but it's knowing what to use each AI engine
yeah.
for
Yep.
And that like Gemini is, more visual images.
Yeah, I mean, I used Gemini to decide what color to paint my house. Like
Exactly.
it's
Exactly.
excellent
Right.
at like I
Rock, more
uploaded a picture of
news.
my house and I said, let me
Yeah.
know what it would look like if the brick and the siding were painted this color and the windows were X color, and it can actually visualize it for you really well. ChatGPT
Yeah.
is not so good at that. Claude's
Right.
honestly not even that good at that. But if you want to automate a process or build a tool or build a mini app, or I even use
Hmm.
Claude, like if I have to make a presentation, I will upload it and say, make this better,
Yeah.
and it will.
Absolutely.
It'll say slide one needs a better header. I noticed this inconsistency. Or just say what you want the presentation to be about. I want 10 slides. I need it to be about
Right.
this. Include these
Hmm.
charts. It'll create the presentation for you. So you can start small with those sorts of things that just create a lot of efficiency and save time for you. And then I think grow from there.
But it is about prompting that AI, right? You got to have a general idea of what you're talking about in order for the AI to do the thing that you need it to do in the best way possible.
I don't know. I felt like I didn't know enough about barge earlier this week. We were talking about it. And I
Okay.
did start there. I just said, like, I don't understand how barge freight is priced. I don't understand why it's not utilized more in the US like it is in other countries. Like, give me a basic overview. And that was
Mhm.
just gathering research, and it helped me
That's
do that.
good.
If you
Yeah.
actually want to create something, you do have to have an end goal in mind, and be able to prompt it to get there. You have to understand what you're trying to work towards and then and give it those prompts.
Do you think companies that are avoiding AI completely, do you think that puts them at risk long term?
I definitely do. I actually wrote a blog on that yesterday about like how to close that gap, because I think the risk is not adopting AI and getting left behind as others are, and they're able to use their people more efficiently and effectively to solve the bigger problems, and those repetitive things can be solved by AI. You can continue to improve margins, drop price, whether that be in manufacturing or trucking, or in anything, whether it's headcount or just the amount of work product your team can put out by using AI. So I think there's a huge risk in not exploring it and looking how to adopt it to become as efficient and effective as possible.
How much of freight pricing today would you say is data driven versus still relationship driven?
I think that's highly dependent on the size of the on the size of the company, both the size of the shipper and the size of the carrier or the broker. I think, the larger companies, it's very data driven. It's algorithms and machine learning that are taking that data in and auto pricing either via API or, whatever process they are submitting their pricing to for shippers or to brokers. I think relationships will always matter. And I think people will always have to, be involved in that, because there's always going to need to be, especially as fraud is so rampant,
Yeah.
a relationship and an understanding of how you create value. I think the concern with everything being automated and there not being relationships is transportation gets incredibly commoditized at that point. So I think it's highly dependent on the size of the organization, but I think each plays a role, but I think data is becoming increasingly important, and I think even if it is gut and relationship based, it's so much easier to have those conversations, and it's so much easier to feel confident in what you're doing and where you're pricing it at if you have a data point backing up that decision, whether it's just, reaffirming what you already thought or opening your eyes to something else that you might not have known or had experience or been exposed to or seen coming in the market. I think the main thing there with the data is it helps predict what might happen so you don't miss that opportunity for margin as the market is changing.
I want to bring something up that you just spoke about that is has become something that has gets said on our show quite often when we talk about AI and the business in hand and its relationships. I want listeners to understand that, all this data that you do that might, make it easier for somebody or AI, there's still going to be relationships that's got to be had. So, you got to find another avenue with AI for a job. If you work on being in a relationship with people and working on it and making it better, you're going to have a place in this industry to
Agreed.
work. And I appreciate that because that is something that's being said almost every show now about, still going to have relationships. Now, what I really want to get into is the fraud. It's everywhere nowadays on television, social media. They're getting smarter every day. They figure out a new loophole or a way that they can execute, their daily dealings. How serious of a problem do we have right now?
It's a huge problem. I mean, you see the freight tech industries the freight tech companies, working to combat it, it's a huge issue in our industry. It's a costly issue. The fraudsters are continually evolving and finding new ways to, cheat the system. It's going to take a lot of coming together and sharing, even with your competitors, what you're doing to combat it. And I think that could possibly be the silver lining of all of this, is that different brokers, different shippers, different carriers are often reluctant to share their best practices and what they're doing with each other, because they don't want to get their competitive advantage, give it away. But I think in this case, it's absolutely necessary, and to share things like, hey, we're seeing this, and they're like, yeah, I'm seeing this too, and come up with ways to combat it, as a whole. And I think in this situation, like, everyone wants to team up against the literal bad guys, right?
So let me get your opinion on this, because it's going on now at the Supreme Court level, the C.H. Robinson case and broker liability. What's your opinion on that? Having been with, a large company.
Well, my personal opinion is that yes, they have to have some responsibility in it, right? I understand that there are so many things they cannot control, right? And ultimately, the carrier who was hauling the load is absolutely responsible. In theory, that's wonderful. The reality is, the carrier hauling the load is not where the money is. And when something happens and there have to be repercussions, it's going to flow to where the money is, whether that's civil or legal. I do think that this ruling will be transformational potentially for our industry. I think between this and Delilah's Law, I'll be very anxious to see how they play out.
We talk about it a lot. I mean, we're obviously associated with Ready App. We talk about driver verification.
Yeah.
We have a new feature coming out called Driver Verify. It's all about knowing who's behind the wheel. It's a problem that our industry hasn't solved. Justin was heavily involved with as a freight agent, mostly in recruiting. I had 65 trucks. The problem is nobody knew who was actually behind the wheel of the truck.
Right.
And I think you're right. I think, we talked about, we're, at Ready App, they're talking to Genlogs, and some other companies at 10th Street, and, talking about like sharing information. Like, while we are competitors in certain aspects, like, we need to come together. There needs to be a centralized platform. The industry is so fragmented. Everybody does a lot of things well, but nobody works together.
Yep.
And I feel like we're behind on the technology side because we just don't work. Everybody's afraid that you're going to take my business. And it's not about that. If it would work together, we'd get a lot of stuff done and do a lot of good for this industry.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you certainly see that in fraud. And like I said, I'm hoping that it will continue to push our industry forward towards doing that. But even in pricing and the time spent in that, where there could be so many different ways to approach that would be quicker and easier for shippers and carriers and brokers. But with it being so highly fragmented, there's just no standardization.
Yeah. Well, I want to ask you on that. So, in my opinion, with the way everything is fragmented, the truck driver is the one that's getting left out. They're the furthest away from the center of the industry.
Yeah.
If we could come up with a way where everybody, centralized, work together, everything, verification wise flew through one family, and then it branched out to, I would think, I'd like your opinion. I would think, okay, yeah, we might lose some companies because of figuring out easier way to do things to absorb that in, maybe a few more mergers. But overall, I think that is worth that sacrifice on a small amount. I don't think it would be, a huge amount of loss, but I think overall it would, first of all, make it a better industry, a more secure industry. But what people fail to realize is everything in trucking is a national homeland security issue. Everything. I'm talking about even down to the identity of the person working in a warehouse. I mean, I've had this conversation before. You need to know even who's in that warehouse, because they could put a bomb in the truck in a dry van and have it set for a timer for X amount of time to be at a certain location, and no one has a clue or keeps up with that.
Again, it goes back to what I was saying about driver verification. I mean, there's no one who really knows who's behind the wheel, and then you get the name and phone number of the person who's hauling that load, like every broker, right? Get the name and phone number. Maybe even now they're asking for an ID. Then they go about, 100 miles or 200 miles, depending on how long the trip is. They get out of that truck, somebody else gets in it, or even worse, they couldn't pick up that load last minute. So they're going to tell them that, Johnny with XYZ trucking company is going to pick that up and no one knows who they are.
Yeah, I think it is an issue. And obviously Road Check Week is coming up. So I just wrote a piece on really the equipment and maintenance reality in ours. So not even just freight fraud and drivers, but just equipment as a whole, and inspections and out of service inspections and the risk there. And the reality is that like 1 in 5 trucks from a maintenance and equipment standpoint likely shouldn't be on the road, right? And that is, to your point, a national security issue. We can think about it, from a standpoint in the CDL correct. The CDL, I wrote a piece a couple weeks ago about the CDL crackdown and how non-domiciled CDL enforcement is reshaping freight capacity. And even in the time I was writing it, then that changed because a few states changed their stance on it, right?
Yeah.
Because there isn't agreement and collaboration on it. And it is all become a political issue instead of a let's do the right thing for the industry, for the American public from a safety standpoint.
100%. We had Sean Everett on just a couple weeks ago with American Truckers United, said the exact same
Yeah.
thing. Yep.
So I think we'll see how that all plays out as well. But there are a lot of regulatory issues happening currently in our industry that could have massive impacts.
So before we close out, I've got kind of a two-part question. So I have 6 kids, but I have 3 little girls right now, and I think your background is impressive. I think what you're doing for the trucking industry as a whole is extremely impressive. And for little girls that are out there that who may be like, I'm not doing anything with trucking or logistics, and help them understand what that is and what you've done to be successful. Maybe, offer some words of encouragement.
So a couple of things there, and thanks for the kind words. I'm sure in some ways and in rooms I'm not in, there are conversations that would never be had about a man that are had about me.
Hmm.
But the reality is, like, I don't care. Like, I want my work to speak for itself. I want my work ethic, the work product I put out to speak for myself. And it shouldn't, and beyond that, it doesn't really matter. I think I've just always been comfortable in a room full of men, and that has to be part of it. But I think more than anything, like, the industry you're in has to fit with your personality type and what you like. And I love that every day looks a little bit different, that I'm solving new problems, that is incredibly fast paced. Like, I am not a grinder. Like, I'm not somebody who could come in and grind to do the same thing every day. I need new challenges each day. And gosh, this industry will give them to you. So I think that's part of why it's been such a good fit for me. And I think there's a few things that women, particularly, but honestly, anyone who's starting out in their career can and should do. Find a mentor if you can. And I don't mean like, and it can be intimidating because you feel like you're like asking someone on a date. I don't mean that. Don't be like, hey, can you be my mentor? I mean, like, if you have a boss who you think cares about you and is willing to invest in you, you need to put in the time to let them invest in you. I think having a personal development plan, which sounds so corny, but it doesn't need to be like a long, big thing. It needs to be like, here's 3 things I'm good at. Here's 3 things I want to get better at this year. And you give that to your boss and you say, these 3 things that I want to get better at, here are my ideas on how I can get better at them. And you give it to your boss and say, what do you think of this? And can you help me reach these goals? If they're a decent boss, they're going to say yes, and they're going to do that for you, right?
Right.
And people like helping when you ask them to do it. So it's literally a matter of taking a little bit of time that shouldn't take you more than an hour. Like, it's a quick, easy thing, writing it down, making yourself think about it, and then taking that step towards sharing it. So I think there's some easy things like that you can do. Listen, the industry is hard, and whether you're just a woman or you're a mother, like in my case, being a working mom is hard. I don't have a stay-at-home wife like most of my colleagues have, right? And that's just different. I have an amazing husband who has an amazing career as well, who's also supportive and very involved with our children. But that makes me better in all aspects. I'm more efficient than most people. I manage time better than most people. I juggle multiple things better than most people. And I think there's this talk about like work-life balance and how important it is. And I think it's a scam. I don't think work-life balance is a real thing. I think
Amen.
Yep.
in all honesty, it's a juggling act. It's a constant juggling
It
act. And that's okay. You just have to get comfortable with that some weeks I travel and I'm gone and I am focused totally on work. And during the day, I'm focused totally on work. So if there's any way I can carve out from 5 to 8 to be totally present at home, then I do that. And if that means I have to work a little bit later at night, or if that means I get up early some days, like, I do it because you're juggling both. Next week I've got, well, I mean, it's May and you said you had 6 kids. Like,
They're
May is
about done with
insane.
school.
It's
They're
terrible.
finishing up
End of
every activity known
the
to
end of the
man,
school year, spring
dance
sports is yeah.
recitals and
Spring
sports and
sports are still going. Today's
oh
field
yeah.
day. It's a different theme I mean, there's a zillion
Yeah.
things going on with school and spring sports and it's
College
busy at
kids
work.
need more money.
So
Of course,
some
of
weeks,
course.
next week, I will have something to do every night with my children, and that's fine. So I know I need to wrap up work earlier, so I manage my time accordingly, right? So it's a matter of juggling, and in some weeks you're going to lean further one way than the other. And for anybody to think that like you just set boundaries and have work-life balance, I don't think that's realistic at some level in your career. So I think just being honest with yourself about that too.
My daughter's taking every business class. She's going to go into business. I try to talk her out of it just because of the struggles. I'm an entrepreneur. I've never worked really for anybody till John, per se. And she watches me grind. I'm a single dad, so I understand, not really having a wife at home or anything.
Yeah, and then at some
And
point you got to just get help, though. I will say that that's
yeah.
like one.
I wished I could. But her seeing the struggles and all that kind of advice, she's not getting in a high school. And I don't know if she'll get that advice in a college per se.
That's why you got to find a mentor. Yep.
Yes. So I appreciate those words. I want to close with the future of freight. I want to get your take and what you think with the data. My opinion, I think brick and mortar stores are going away. I think we're going to end up with huge warehouses, and I think more companies are going to work with Amazon and just have their products at Amazon because everybody wants to buy online. So, what do you see? Based on your data, what the future looks like? Because I think we could get away with a lot of the long haul stuff. I think it'll be more regional freight with maybe more box trucks, deliveries than anything.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think there's a lot of variables at play there and kind of what happens with the railroad merger as well. But I do think that long haul will continue to probably go more towards intermodal and trucking
Mm.
will continue to get more regionalized. I do think that we are entering kind of a freight renaissance. Like I think that so from a larger picture, I don't know what's going to happen with brick and mortar. I think there's absolutely merit to your argument. I rarely go in person to stores anymore, which is kind of sad.
I think it is sad. I feel I mean, definitely down here in Tampa, the brick and mortar stores are going up. They're rebuilding. They're making improvements and enhancements and building new shopping centers and outdoor malls and stuff where we thought like, maybe prior to COVID and just after it was, gonna go the way Justin's talking about. I mean, down here, like the malls are packed.
I was going to say, I do think there is like a nostalgic element to it. And I do think I've read some things lately that like kids are starting to hang out at the mall again, like we used to,
They are,
and
yeah.
that was dead for a while. So
Mhm.
I think there could be a resurgence in some of that as people are trying to get back to how we grew up as like normal lives. There's all of this like, 90s mom summer that people are trying to push to where your kids
Yeah,
are
get
like
out of the
outside and
house.
playing games and board
Yeah.
Yep.
games and like do it instead of, just inside on your phone or streaming TV all the time. So I don't know the answer to that question, but I do think that we are going to continue to see the freight market as a whole tighten. And I do think that we are not yet to the peak of that we are just in the beginning of that wave. And then, with first capacity exiting, now we're starting to also see demand rise. And I think we're going to see both of those things continue.
Well, Julie, this has been a genuinely valuable conversation. You brought context, data, and candor, which is exactly
Mhm.
what this audience needs right now. So tell people where they can connect with you. Where should they go to learn more about Sonar?
Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. It's Julie Vandekamp. Email me at jvandekamp, which is JVANDEKAMP at gosonar.com, or learn more about Sonar at our website, gosonar.com.
Awesome. Well, Justin, you want to close us out with our sponsors?
Yeah, yeah. So we want to thank them for making this happen. So this episode is brought to you by Gray Cross. It's graycross.org. Gray Cross is dedicated to supporting trucking families when they need it the most, whether it's a medical emergency, financial hardship, or the unexpected situation of loss of life on the road. They step in to provide real help to the peoples behind the wheel. Any amount is very appreciated to help those families during those times. And then also we want to thank our main sponsor, RadiApp. RadiApp is changing the way drivers, carriers, and brokers connect by creating a verified driver profile that puts everything in one place. Work history, documents, qualifications, all organized and ready to go. Instead of filling out the same application over and over, drivers, you can just share your one profile to anyone within seconds. It can get you hired faster. It can help you with DOT stops. It can help you with any day life. And it's just, RadiApp's just bringing structure, transparency, and trust in a process that's been fragmented, as we say on here all the time.
All right. Everybody drive safe. Julie, really pleasure.
Thank you.
Great meeting you, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Same. Sounds good. Thank you.